Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's EarthEcho STEMExplore virtual career connection featuring Jasmine Graham. My name is Casey. I'm a programs manager here at EarthEcho International, and we're so excited to have everyone join us today for this live event. EarthEcho International is a global nonprofit founded on the belief that youth have the power to change our planet. Reaching more than 2 million people in 146 countries, we provide original content, immersive experiences, and trusted resources to empower young people to become leaders and problem solvers in their communities and around the world. Here at EarthEcho, we're proud to work with an outstanding group of youth leaders who help drive our work to empower their peers around the globe to take an active role in protecting our planet. We're joined today by one of our exceptional Youth Leadership Council members, Lily, and she's going to help me moderate today's live event. Now, to give her a little introduction, Lily is a student at the Dowington STEM Academy of Pennsylvania, where she participates in the International Baccalaureate program. She's interested in studying chemistry and environmental science and loves being outdoors. She enjoys being part of her school's tennis and track teams, as well as paddleboarding and cooking. Lily loves to help young girls explore STEM career options in STEM fields. So Lily, welcome and take it away.
Thanks, Casey. We are so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us as we learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMexplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. This live event is part of STEMexplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration through dynamic female characters. And we want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites across the country and give a huge welcome to everybody joining us today. Just a reminder that you can send in questions anytime via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation a few times to answer all your questions. Feel free to start typing questions in the chat space, and we'll be sure to answer those as we go along. Now let's get started. We want to welcome today's STEMexplore mentor, Jasmine Graham. Welcome, Jasmine.
Thanks.
Jasmine is a marine biologist specializing in Elasmobranch Ecology and evolution. Her past research interests include small-tooth sawfish movement ecology and hammerhead shark phylogeny. She received her BS in marine biology and her BA in Spanish from the College of Charleston, where she was a member of the Honors College and the William Atkin Fellow Society. Funded by the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program, she completed an MSc in Biological Science at Florida State University. She is a member of the American Elasmobranch Society and served on their Student Action Committee for 2 years. Jasmine completed internships with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, Fort Johnson Marine Lab, and FWC Division of Marine Fisheries Management. She worked as an instructor for the Saturday at the Sea program through the Florida State University Office of STEM Teaching Activities. Jasmine has a passion for science education and making science more accessible for everybody. She's excited to be part of the Marseille Lace program, help open doors for more underrepresented minority students to join the exciting field of marine science. Jasmine, why don't you tell us more about yourself and what you are currently doing at the Mote Marine Laboratory?
Thanks, Lily. So I'm Jasmine. I'm really excited to be here to talk to all of you today. So a little bit about me. I am currently living in Florida. I work at Mote Marine Lab and Aquarium in Sarasota, Florida. If you guys ever find yourselves down here in Florida, I hope that you stop by our wonderful aquarium. So what I do at Mote right now is I work on the Marseille Lace project, and I'm the coordinator for that. And what that is, it's a big grant that was funded by the National Science Foundation and the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. And our whole focus is to recruit, support, and retain minority students in marine science. And I'm really excited to work on this project because it's something that's a big passion of mine. Being a Black woman and a marine scientist, I hope that one day that whenever people think of a marine scientist, it's not just one type of person that they picture. So I want really everyone to feel like they can be a marine scientist because it's a great, great field to work in. And so I just am really excited to be encouraging young people to follow in the path of all of the great marine scientists that came before them and really dive into this field. So I am originally from, I say that I'm from Columbia, South Carolina because it's simpler, but I'm from a military family and we moved around a lot. So I was actually born in Montgomery, Alabama, but I only stayed there a year. Don't ask me anything about it. I don't know. And then I moved to California, and then I moved to Texas, and then finally I landed in South Carolina. I say that I'm from South Carolina because my dad's side of the family is from South Carolina. They're actually from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So that was kind of my home base while I was moving around. I always had a place to come back to, always be coming back to my grandmother's house for all of our family gatherings. And that's really where I started to fall in love with the ocean. We would go out and we would go fishing. I come from a big fishing family. We spent a lot of time out on the piers fishing, and I would go and check out all the tide pools and all of the cool animals that are just hanging out on the beach. And I thought that that was really fun. And so that's where my first interest kind of sparked. And I am super excited to be here talking with all of you because maybe you've had this moment too, where you're like, whoa, ocean is cool, but what do I do with that? Well, I learned that you can make a whole career out of that, which is super cool. So I actually went, and in high school, I went to a summer camp called Marine Quest, offered by the University of North Carolina. And that's where I figured out that you actually can make a whole career out of hanging out in the water and looking at cool animals. I was like, sign me up. So that's how I became a marine biologist. Aside from science, I have a lot of other interests. I do theater. Fun fact, I'm a classically trained opera singer. That's super random, but I am. I also like to sew. I love reading, especially science fiction. I have a dog. His name is Iggy. He is loving that I am home all the time right now. And so that's a little bit about me. I, like Lily mentioned, I went to college at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. And then after I finished, I went to move to Florida, to Tallahassee, Florida. And the Tallahassee is where I went to do my graduate school. And for those of you that don't know, graduate school is something that you can do if you want to further specialize in your area of expertise. You can go to graduate school and get an additional degree after you finish your bachelor's, which is what you get in college. So I went and I decided to go and pursue a master's degree. So I moved down to Tallahassee to work on that. And then finally, after I finished all of that, I moved down here to Sarasota, where I am now. So a lot of moving around, but I got to do a lot of fun things that I'm really excited to tell you guys about. So there's a lot of institutions that have been really instrumental in getting me here. And I want to take a little bit of time to kind of acknowledge all of those things, because I think it's really important to acknowledge all of the people that helped you get to where you are. So first, when I was in elementary school, I was part of a program called Alert, which is a sort of gifted and talented program that was geared towards science and math. And so that's where I kind of started on actually doing science. So I already had the scientific curiosity, but Alert really helped me at a young age learn how to be a scientist. And then after that, I went to a magnet program called the Learning Collaborative, or TLC. And I did a lot more science and math with them. And then I got to meet a lot of cool people that I'm still friends with. And I got to have a lot of teachers that really inspired me to pursue academia and keep going in school, and really just kept me motivated and really made learning fun. So then the next institution is College of Charleston. So I went to the College of Charleston, and I went to do a degree in marine biology. Originally, when I went to College of Charleston, I thought I was going to do marine, animal, wildlife, veterinary. I changed my mind, decided that I was more interested in research and more science than animal care. And then I did a couple of different RU programs, which are research experiences for undergraduates. I did one at the Fort Johnson Marine Lab, which is in Charleston. And that's a really cool place because it's really a gathering of a lot of different types of scientists. There's College of Charleston has its lab there, so that represents the academic. We also had the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, which is a state agency. And then we also had both NIST and NOAA, which are federal agencies. So we kind of had every possible option that you could have in marine science, which is really cool because then I realized that you didn't just have to do one thing. You didn't just have to be a professor to be a marine scientist. There are so many other options. You could be a fisheries manager, you could do outreach, you could do education. And so that was really exciting to me. I also did another RU at Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, which I mentioned before, where I worked with Dr. Whitman Miller. And we did a coastal acidification project, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And that was really my firsthand experience doing water chemistry and being out on boats regularly. And that's kind of how I figured out I love being out on boats, which was really helpful when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, because it would have been very useful to find out that I didn't like boats early on in my career before I went down this rabbit hole of things where I'm fishing and I'm on boats all the time. So that was a good way to kind of get my foot in the water with field work and see how much I like it. And I loved it. So I kind of kept going down that path. And I figured out I like being outside. I like being outside much more than I like being in a lab. So that's what I'm going to do. So then the next thing I did was I was applying to graduate school. So I needed to get funding to go to graduate school because who wants to pay for things when you can do it for free? So I applied to the National Science Foundation's Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and I was awarded that, which was super exciting because it's very competitive. And then I went to Florida State to go study sawfish. And then, of course, I got my master's degree at Florida State, but I got so much more than a degree. I got to work with some really great people on the sawfish recovery team. A lot of them have become some really important mentors in my life, like Tanya Wiley, and of course, my advisor, my master's advisor, Dean Grubbs. A lot of the other sawfish recovery team members I'm still in contact with. We are actively working on several manuscripts, and I really am really excited to be a part of this group of people. And I'm really happy that they've kind of adopted me as senior scientists and kind of taken me under their wing. So after thanking all those people and institutions that kind of got me here, I'll tell you a little bit more about the research that I've done. So I have done lots of different things. Lily kind of mentioned them. But my first big project was hammerhead phylogeny. So I have a couple pictures here on the slides. So I did a big project that involved lab work and computer work. So the first part of my project, I was studying the anatomical characteristics of the hammerheads. And I did this using a process called digital segmentation, where we CT scanned sharks. And then I kind of, you can think of it as digitally dissecting the sharks and looking at each different structure in their internal anatomy. And I used this to kind of compare them to see who is more related to who and build a phylogeny, which is basically like a family tree of sharks. And then the other part of my project was lab work, where I was actually doing a process called mitogenome capture, which basically is me taking the entire mitochondrial genome. So your genome is where all of your DNA is. And the mitochondria is, you guys probably have heard this a billion times in school, it's the powerhouse of the cell. But also it has its own DNA that's passed down from your mother, and from your mother only. So it's really cool because there's not as much gene mixing, because it's only mother to daughter, mother, 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 and we keep going. So the mix from both parents doesn't factor in. So it's a lot easier to tell what kind of changes are happening in the species. And it's a lot easier to kind of predict where changes are happening and where speciation happens and things like that. So I used those techniques, which were new to me, but also pretty new in the world of science. So it was really exciting to get to be one of the first people to do this technique, and then really be cutting edge with the digital segmentation, which was just starting to be a big thing at the time I was doing this. So that was really cool. So speaking of digital segmentation, I have a cool video to show you guys. So this video is showing you how I actually went through the process of segmenting. So this is kind of the 3 panels that you see images in right now are how the CT scan looks. And then this new panel that has just popped up is a 3D rendering of the different aspects of that CT scan. So I go through and I actually pick apart piece by piece every little anatomical structure. So right now I am pulling out what's called the hyomandibular. That's going to be a quiz question later. So this is a piece of the jaw. So I'm going to isolate it by getting rid of everything else that's not what I'm working on right now. And this is a very delicate process. Depending on how great the scan is, it can take me anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. Some scans are better than others, depending on how young the shark was, and how long and how well it's been preserved, because I did all of this with museum specimens. So some specimens are like twice as old as I am, so they were a little less clean whenever I scanned them. They've been pushed over the years. But this is a pretty good one. So this is a pretty easy one to segment. All of the distinctions between the different parts, you can see these indentions that I'm working with, so I can tell where one piece starts and the other piece stops. So that is how I segment out that one. And this was in real time. This was not a sped up video. That was how long it took me to actually segment out that one piece. Some pieces are easier to segment than others. I purposefully chose one that was pretty easy to do for that video. So this is what it looks like when I'm done. So we have the skin layer, and then we have all of the internal structures here. These are 2 different species. So in the middle, we have Sphaeronotutes, and then on the outside, we have Eusphaerona blocki. And these are 2 different types of hammerheads. A lot of people think that there's only one species of hammerhead. There is not. There's bonnet heads, crown, scoop, there's wing-headed sharks, there's all kinds of different hammerheads that all fit into this Sphaeronidae or hammerhead family. So I was looking at all of them. So then I got to do a lot of lab work, a lot of work on the computer, but I wanted to try out some field work. So I actually, while I was working on this project, I went out with one of our collaborators that actually collected genetic samples. And so I went sampling with him. And this was my first go at field work. And I loved it. And I loved fishing. I knew that I loved fishing already, but having the opportunity to fish and have it mean something besides dinner was super cool. So that was my first go at field work. And then I decided that I really liked that. So I wanted to explore that some more, which is why I went to the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, where I got to do some more field work. So I was working on a coastal acidification project. Not only did I get to do field work, but I also got to try my hand at some plumbing, electrical work, all kinds of things. And this is where I learned that when you're a scientist, you really are a jack of all trades. And there's a lot of different things that you need to figure out how to do. So if a tool hasn't been invented, you got to make it. So we actually made this tool that looks pretty rudimentary, but it got the job done. Kind of looks like a bomb, which is unfortunate when you're trying to fly places with it. TSA has a lot of questions about boxes that have things that count down and wires hanging out of them. We also built this tube thing out of PVC pipes that you see. This actually runs the water through and kind of churns it up so we get a more accurate CO2 reading, so that all of the CO2 isn't settled and it doesn't go past the sensor too fast for it to actually read. So this was all very cool. I spent a lot of time out on the boat, went out on the boat every day. And I really learned that I do like field work. So I did a lot with this project. I also got to learn some other things that aren't really sciencey, but they're fun things that I learned. So the first thing that I learned, which I kind of knew, but I didn't know what it meant, is that the Chesapeake Bay is one of the most productive estuaries in the world, which I knew in theory, but what that translates to is you have to clean your equipment off a lot, because lots of things grow there, lots of things live there, and we had lots of bryozoans and all sorts of encrusting organisms trying to make their home on our equipment. So I spent a lot of time scraping off living things off of our equipment and throwing them back in the water and being like, please settle somewhere else. Don't live here. You can live somewhere else. So that was fun. I also learned how to use a really sophisticated titration system and do some water chemistry. I learned how to identify plankton and counting plankton. And from that, I learned that I hate microscopes and they make my head hurt, and I don't ever want to count plankton again. So that is not for me. So it's really important when you're doing experiences that even negative experiences tell you something. So if you don't like microscopes, that's useful to know, because you don't want to try and go get a job where you're going to have to be looking at a microscope and realize now that you're at the job that you don't like looking at microscopes. So every experience is important. So after the Smithsonian, I went on to do some sawfish research. And sawfish are super cool animals. They are a type of ray. A lot of people think that they're sharks. They're actually rays. Fun fact, that's also on the quiz. And so these guys are pretty big. So a lot of people don't realize just how big they can get. So they actually can get to be 16 feet long. Which is pretty crazy. And so they start out small and cute, and they have these little gelatinous sheaths on them. So you see there, I have a little baby. That's how small that one's actually not the smallest. That one's a young of year, so it's about a year old. But they have this little gelatinous sheath on their teeth. So whenever they are born, they don't hurt the mom, because who wants to give birth to a chainsaw? So they have this little gelatinous sheath to kind of protect the mom. So I did a lot of research here, tagging the sawfish and tracking their movements. And this was a really fun experience because I got to spend a lot of time out in the field. These animals are super rare, so anytime that you get to see one, it's a cool experience. And the fact that I've gotten to see multiple in my life is pretty amazing. So if you ever are in South Florida and you're boating around, keep your eyes out. Maybe you'll see a sawfish. They're elusive. They're critically endangered, which is part of the reason why I was studying them, to try and help with their conservation, figuring out where they're moving, and assessing their risk of being caught accidentally in commercial fisheries. So that's all I have about my research. So I think at this time, we're going to take a little break and ask questions.
Yeah, so why don't we direct this to Casey if we have any questions? I saw a couple coming in from the chat and maybe from YouTube, I think.
Yes, absolutely. We have a lot of questions. So thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing your story and the work that you've done. So one question we have coming in from Ronnie. The question is, what degree do you have to become a marine scientist? And also, did you have any fish growing up?
Yes. Okay. Yay. So first off, the degree question. So going to college, getting a bachelor's degree, there are a lot of jobs that you can do with a bachelor's degree. So if you want to do that and you do your bachelor's degree and you go into straight into the workforce, that's an option. A lot of people do that and they kind of see how they like it. And then if they decide that they want to kind of move up into higher level positions or maybe run their own lab, they go back to graduate school. But you definitely can do marine science actively with a bachelor's degree. If you want to do like higher level stuff or have your own lab, or get some specific government agency jobs that are mid-level senior scientist positions, you are going to want to do a master's degree. To teach at universities, most universities require a PhD to teach. So if you are wanting to be one of those professors that's teaching and doing research, you're going to want a PhD. If you're wanting to run your own lab in a government organization or a non-governmental organization, typically they're going to want you to have a PhD. If you want to be a leader in the policy making realm, you're going to want a PhD. So it kind of just depends on what you want to do. If you want to be the big shot in charge, PhD. If you want to, have the flexibility to kind of be your own boss and run things a little bit, but you're not the supervisor over everyone, master's degree. If you are content with just hanging out, doing the research, going out on the boat, fishing, doing whatever, diving, whatever, bachelor's degree is probably fine. So it kind of just depends on what level you want to progress to. So that's something that you really want to figure out. I definitely recommend not going straight to PhD when you don't know what you're doing, because that is a lot of work and a lot of stress if you change your mind. So making sure that that's what you want before you put all of the time and energy, I definitely recommend doing that.
Awesome. Now we have Dr. Figueroa and his class are tuning in online. And first of all, Dr. Figueroa says he loves how you were able to highlight your lab work, your computer work, and your field work all at the same time. But he wants to know, did you make that device? And that device, I'm guessing Dr. Figueroa, is this one.
I personally did not make it. Like, it was not my brainchild. It was Dr. Whitman Miller's brainchild. I just helped with the troubleshooting of it's leaking, and him being like, we got to figure out why it's leaking. So I did not design this. That is his brainchild. But I did have to learn a lot of electrical and mild plumbing to figure out how to troubleshoot it when I'm out on the boat, and he's not there. And he built it, and I just got to fix it. So I did not build that. I also realized that I didn't answer the question about having fish. I did have fish, had a freshwater tank as a child. And then in my teenage years, I decided to be bold and have a saltwater tank, which I had for about 2 years before I got super overwhelmed and I sold my fish.
Wonderful. Anika asks, what is the most interesting animal that you have ever worked with?
Ah, man, that's tough. I gotta choose one.
And so I'm going to guess that these critters are not.
The plankton,
Yes.
no. Plankton are very cool and very important, and they give us a lot of oxygen. So go plankton, the often underestimated little guys. I would say that sawfish is my favorite, just because it's rare and it's like a unicorn. And every time I see one, I get excited, even though I've seen them before. And I love watching people volunteers come out on our boat and see them for the first time. It's like a magical experience. And they look so like scary from the top because they have like these saws on their face. But then you flip them over and they got these derpy little smiles and they just like make you just go, ah, it's pretty great.
So we do have a couple questions about sawfish in particular. The one question that we do continually get is, did you ever get cut by the sawfish? And then somebody else asked, how long do sawfish live?
Okay, so no, I have not gotten whacked by a sawfish, knock on wood. We usually are pretty careful. We're all trained to handle them both for our safety and for their safety. So we make sure that we have them comfortably under control. And if they give us any indication that they're about to freak out, we back up and let them freak out and they swing their little saw and we just get out of the way. Our poor boat has definitely had some holes put in her from the sawfish, but thankfully none of us have gotten whacked. As far as the question of how long do sawfish live, I don't know. Nobody knows. That's the answer. So that's one of the things that some of my collaborators are trying to figure out. We have some evidence of at least 30 to 40 years because we've had some in captivity live that long. Granted, captivity in the wild are a little different, but we have also had a recapture of a sawfish that was just over, we estimate, 20 years old. So we caught her as a juvenile and then again as an adult. So the short answer is we don't know. Maybe you should be a sawfish researcher and figure it out.
That's great. And before we move on, I do want to answer a couple of more questions, particularly about the hammerheads. So we have Albert in here tuning in live, and he says that his favorite hammerhead species is a scalloped hammerhead, but he wants to know what kind of hammerheads you were working with. And somebody else wanted to know where the hammerheads came from that were put into the CT scan. If you can explain that a little bit more, and I'll pull up those slides.
Yes. So I worked with all of the hammerheads, either with their DNA or with the museum specimens or both. The only hammerheads that I have personally handled alive are great hammerhead, scalloped hammerhead, probably a Carolina hammerhead. It's a cryptic species, so there's no way for you to tell until you do their DNA. They look exactly like scalloped hammerheads, so probably touched Carolina hammerhead. And then bonnet heads, lots of bonnet heads. As far as the CT scanning goes, those were museum specimens, so they came from all over the world. So there's a lot of hammerhead species. Not all of them are native to the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico. Some of them are native to other oceans. And so obviously those specimens came from overseas. But basically the way that we collect museum specimens are people catch them. They kind of know whether or not they might be useful to someone. If they happen to die, rather than throwing them overboard, if someone can use them for science, we will save them because we obviously don't want to go around killing animals unnecessary. So if we have one die, everyone tries to use as much of it as possible so that people later don't have to go out and kill any. So they will send them, they preserve them in ethanol and they send them to the museum. So our specimens came from the American Museum of Natural History, and they just have treasure troves of all kinds of dead animals in jars and giant vats of ethanol. They have giant squid that are saved. It's pretty awesome if you ever have an opportunity to go see the dead specimens of the Natural History Museum. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. So one more question before we move on, and we do have several questions coming in, so everybody just hang tight. We are going to break for another Q&A session before we let Jasmine continue on. But our friend Anya Johnson asks, she's a high schooler and she's going to Hawaii Pacific this fall. So she's majoring in marine biology and she wants to focus on shark conservation. So do you have any tips of, one, getting through classes as as an undergrad, but also what advice would you have for an aspiring youth that might want to become a shark biologist or conservationist?
So tips for school, work hard, pay attention, meet everyone you can. Networking is hugely important. The shark world is very small. Everyone knows each other. So if you can make a friend, you have all the friends, which is beautiful. So you just kind of connect with your professors, go to office hours, even if you don't need help necessarily, but just so that you make that connection with them and they know you as a person rather than like some random person that sits in their class. That's useful. Also, if you have any opportunities to do research or kind of try things out, whether it be paid or unpaid, obviously paid is better because like people need to eat. But if you have the means to maybe take an afternoon and go out on the boat with somebody as a volunteer, I definitely think that you should take that. Any research experiences, things like that, internships, looking into those, trying to do those as much as you can. Just so you, one, can try everything, because you're going to find things that you don't like me and microscopes. I needed to do that to know that I didn't like that. And you want to find out as early as possible what you don't like. So just try things, even if you're saying, well, I don't know that I'm interested in invertebrates, but I'm going to try invertebrates because maybe you love invertebrates and you just don't know it. So I would say try everything. Try everything once. Why not? You're young. You got time. And you don't want to pigeonhole yourself too early. And there was a second part of that question. I don't remember what it was.
Advice for someone who wants to become a shark biologist or conservationist, but I do know we will get to that later if you want to save that.
Okay, I will.
Sounds good. So Lily, I pass it back to you.
Okay, so why don't we can talk about some of the realities, for instance, like how much someone can expect going into this field. I know schooling can get really expensive. I just finished up the application process and I'm kind of in the midst of like deciding where I want to go. And it can get really, really overwhelming, especially in terms of like expenses. So what would you say about like in this field, like what can you expect?
So as far as going to college, go to a college that you like point blank period. If you don't like it, that's like, you don't want to be miserable in college. So don't worry about where you feel like your parents want you to go or where you feel like you should go. Don't worry about prestige. Don't worry about names. You certainly don't need to pay a big sticker price to go to like Harvard or something. Nothing against Harvard. Sorry if anyone's listening that went to Harvard. I just randomly picked that. But you don't need to pay a huge sticker price to go to Harvard just to say that you went to Harvard. I went to College of Charleston, which is a small liberal arts college. I didn't pay anything for my education because I was offered a full ride. So if you can go to a small school or start at a community college and transfer to a four-year college, do what's best for you. Don't worry about how is this going to look. Are people going to judge me if I went to College of Charleston instead of Yale? I was offered the opportunity to go to Duke University, and I chose College of Charleston because I felt more at home there, and it was smaller, and I knew that I personally am a little bit overwhelmed by people in big classes. So I did what was best for me. A lot of people will say, well, you could have gone to Duke. Why didn't you go to Duke? Because Duke was twice as expensive and I didn't like it. That's why I didn't go there. So visiting, making sure that you feel comfortable, making sure that financially you are making smart decisions, because that's like setting you up for your whole life. Don't take out a whole bunch of loans because you feel like you should go to this college. Go to a community college for 2 years, transfer. Like, there is no shame in that. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you need to go to some top tier school to be a scientist, because that is false. So then graduate school, if you decide to go to graduate school in science, you should never pay for it, because there are so many schools that will give you tuition waivers and stipends for you to do graduate school. Don't go to a school where you have to pay money. Don't do it. So ideally, you should pay very little for undergrad, as little as possible, and then pay nothing for graduate school and then be a scientist. So there's a lot of different paths you can take. You can be in academia and be a professor. You can be in a government organization and do management or research or outreach or policy or any of those types of things. You can work for nonprofits like I do. I work for Mote. And depending on what path you take, the salaries differ a little bit. So I highly suggest that you go for what you want to do, and just kind of make sure that you're financially taken care of, but like don't do some job that you don't really want to do because you would make more doing it. If you have enough money to live, ultimately that's the goal. Like, I want to be able to eat and pay rent or my mortgage or whatever. There are some jobs out there that pay a lot more than others. So I work for a nonprofit. We don't make a ton of money. It's a nonprofit organization. I'm doing it because my heart is in it, not for money. And that was what worked for me. Some people, they have more expectations in their lifestyle and they wanted to go into industry or something like that. You make a little bit more money doing that. You could be a professor, which requires a postdoc usually, or if you want to run your own lab, there is extra schooling and then extra research involved before you're like eligible to apply for those jobs. So just keeping that in mind, that you would need to do your bachelor's, potentially a master's, definitely a PhD, and then you would need to do a postdoc after that, which is anywhere from 1 to 5 years of you working in a lab and building your own research program so that you are marketable when you go to apply to bring your lab somewhere else, like at a school or something. So you work on getting a whole bunch of publications and building your research up so that you are marketable to institutions that are just going to bring you on, and they're potentially bringing all of the research that you've done into their institution. So just keeping that in mind, that there are extra steps depending on which direction you go. And there are directions where you make a lot of money. I feel like people think that the scientists automatically make a lot of money. I don't know where that came from. There are some people that make a lot of money, but in conservation, not so much. A lot of us are just here because we love it. So keeping that in mind, if money is super important to you, yeah, it's gonna be interesting for you. That's all I'm gonna say. Just making sure that you love what you do. That's the important thing. I don't know anyone that's a scientist that's like starving. We're all like comfortable, but we're not making 6 figures and driving Rolls Royces. So that's that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for talking about that. I think like it's really important to talk about money, but definitely not like the most important aspect of being happy in a job. So here at EarthEcho, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. So can you tell us a little bit more about how your work contributes to a sustainable future?
Yes. So my Sawfish work was, half of it was about identifying critical habitat, so areas where sawfish spend a lot of time. And the reason why we want to identify those places are because we want to make sure that we aren't manipulating that environment so much that the sawfish can't use it anymore. So the mangroves are very important to them. As we develop our coastlines and we take out mangroves, that is affecting them. So we want to know where they're spending a lot of time, where are their nursery grounds, things like that, because we don't want to upset the balance of the habitats that they're using. They also rely a lot on freshwater. The mangroves rely a lot on freshwater and outputs. So understanding where they are helps us decide where water should go, because we have dams and we change the way that water flows. Humans have huge impacts on ecosystems, and it's really important for us to try and understand as much as possible the animals that we're impacting and who all is using those spaces that we're deciding to build condominiums at, because if they need it more, we need to build the condominium somewhere else. The other part of my research was looking at bycatch risk. So commercial fisheries, they will accidentally catch things that they're not purposely trying to catch. So you might have a shrimp trawl and they're obviously trying to catch shrimp, but unfortunately, as you see in this picture here, sometimes we get sawfish caught in there. And this is basically a death sentence for the sawfish. It puts a lot of strain on their bodies. A lot of times their rostrum are broken off. Sometimes the shrimpers cut them off to get them out of the net. And if they don't have their rostrum, which is their saw, they can't eat. And so this is very detrimental to them. So part of my project was understanding where are people fishing and where are sawfish at, and where are the spots where the sawfish are most at risk. And are there different periods of time where sawfish and the fisheries are interacting and other times where there aren't? And the reason why I want to learn this is because when we make policies and we decide where you can and can't fish, if there is a place where clearly there are a lot of interactions happening between endangered species and bycatch in commercial fisheries, we need to address that. And obviously, these are the fishermen's livelihoods. We depend a lot on the sea for food. And so we don't want to have to, cold cut and say, nobody's fishing, we're just never gonna eat seafood, because that's not realistic and that's not sustainable. But if we can figure out where the places are that it's most risky, and direct the fishermen to areas where it's not as risky for those endangered species, we can create fisheries that are sustainable, where we're not doing a lot of damage to the ecosystem, but we are still providing jobs and economic stability to the fishermen.
All right, awesome. So let's break one more time and we can answer some more questions we have coming in from the chat. See if Casey has any more.
Absolutely. So real quick, Jasmine, I want you to answer this one that we had coming in from viewers on YouTube, is that people have heard about sawfish and saw sharks. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yes. Okay, so sawfish are rays. The reason why you can tell that they're rays, easiest, simplest thing that I tell everyone, it's a ray if the mouth is on the bottom and the gills are on the bottom. It's a shark if the mouth is in front and the gills are on the side. That's the big ding, ding, ding. That's how you tell. So you'll notice here we have this little sawfish with his little derpy mouth that's on the bottom. You can kind of see the little indents where his gills are. It's a little hard to see in those pictures, but both his gills and his mouth are on the underside. And if you also think about stingrays and other things that people usually think of as rays, that's the same thing, mouths and gills on the bottom. Saw sharks are sharks because their mouth is out in front, their gills are on the side. Their structure of their rostrum is also different. So the rostrum is the saw part. The saw sharks, their teeth come all the way to the base and all the way to the tip. The sawfish, they're not at the tip and they're not at the base of the saw. So that's another big difference. There's a lot of other more complex genetic anatomical differences, but that's like basically what you need to know.
Excellent. We also have folks asking about the alert program that you mentioned in elementary school. Do you know if that's available in all states? Can you explain that a little bit more?
I don't know if it's available in other states. I want to say yes. I think it's a national program. Not sure. That would be a question for your school system. I would Google your school district and type in alert and see if it exists. But for me in South Carolina, alert was every Wednesday we were pulled out of class and we went and had our own separate little class that was like science and math focused. And we would all like get together and we had like critical thinking and different projects that we did. Like I remember we did an architecture project where we built a replica of a house and we had to do electricity in this house. It was like very complex looking back on it for a fifth grader to do. And so we did projects like that were pretty intensive and definitely a lot of science and math, critical thinking focused. So if that does exist in your district, I highly recommend you try and get into that because I enjoyed it. It was fun. I learned a lot.
Great. And we have an interesting question from Leah. What if you have a fear of water, but you want to study marine animals?
Yes. Okay. So, well, the first thing you could do is try and overcome your fear of water, because I feel like anytime that we have a fear, it just feels good to overcome it. So just even if you start with like, I'm going to step into the ocean, I'm just going to put my toe in there. You just go one step at a time until you get in there. That would be one thing. Other thing, so you can study marine animals without actually getting in the water. So you can do lab work and other people can do all the sampling and you could just sit back in the lab and count the plankton or do the genetics or run the experiment in your lab setting and not actually have to go out on a boat or dive or do anything like that. There are tons of options where you can get involved in marine science and not have to be in the field. Not all scientists are in the field. There are a lot of scientists that don't ever go on boats. Some of them get seasick, and there's a lot of scientists that never go in the lab. It kind of just depends on what you like. So I personally decided that I liked field work more than I liked lab work. So I pursued projects that involved me being in the field. But you could take the opposite approach and say, you know, the ocean's scary. I don't want to go out there, but I want to learn about it. And then you can have people bring things back to your lab and you could do lab work because there's a lot of people that don't want to be in the lab. I'd love to have someone in their lab group that wants to stay back and do all the lab work while they go out into the boat.
Excellent. So I'm going to take two more questions. We are running out of time. We're actually over time. So I want to thank everyone for all this interaction and all the questions. And for those of you in Zoom, maybe stick around for a few more minutes and we'll see if Jasmine can stick around for us. But one question I do want to ask, and I don't know if I can answer this, maybe you or Lily can answer this, but for every 100 people in the marine biology field, how many of them are women? Do you have any thoughts on that, or
so
it's a tough question to answer?
So I actually do know the answer to this because of my job.
Perfect.
So I've done a lot of research on this. So actually, when we look at the gender equity in marine science in terms of who's getting bachelor's degrees, it's almost even between men and women in marine science. So, I mean, there are other things that play into what people do with those bachelor's degrees and what people get paid. And, you know, we could talk about things like that all day. But in terms of sheer numbers of people coming out of college with marine science degrees, it's like 47% women and 53% men. It's pretty close to being dead even.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know as we do here at EarthEcho and so many other organizations try and highlight women in STEM careers. I know I come from the marine science field as well, and there are a lot of women in this field in particular, but then when you look at another STEM field, like say engineering, that number might change quite drastically actually. So it is very interesting. So one more question we're gonna ask, Jasmine, and this will lead Lily into your final wrap up, but did you ever have any obstacles you had to overcome? And if so, did anyone tell you no? And how did you turn those no's into a yes?
Oh man, that's a great question. So yes, there have been quite a few obstacles. I think the first big obstacle came when I was really little and I was out and I was fishing and I had this person come up to me and I was a little kid. I don't know what, this person was also a kid, but a little older than me. And they tried to tell me that I was fishing wrong. And I said, no, I'm not. Like, I know what I'm doing. I got this with my little Tweety bird pole. Trust me, I'm an expert. I got this. And then they said something along the lines of, well, girls can't fish. And I said, I'm a girl and I'm fishing, so obviously they can. And so that was the first time that I was confronted with this idea that I can't do something because of who I am. The second obstacle was when I was in middle school. And I had a teacher that did not have a lot of faith in me for whatever reasons. I think she had some biases that she had to work out on her own. But she basically said to me that I wasn't going to succeed in science because I wasn't good at math, which hurt me because I did struggle a lot with math whenever I was young. And ironically, now I tutor kids in math. But yeah, so I had to work really hard to be good at math. And I'm actually thankful for her for saying that, because it really just made me put the pedal to the metal and be like, I'll show you. I'm gonna be good at math. And so here I am. Did it. Even though I couldn't math in 7th grade, I can math now, and I'm a scientist. And then I think the other obstacle that I've faced that's been a pretty consistent obstacle has been like little comments and things like whenever I say, I'm a marine biologist, and people say, you don't look like a marine biologist, or they say, Black people don't swim, or something crazy about me being different from how they picture a marine biologist, which I'm like, well, you need to adjust your picture. I don't know what to tell you. So whenever I meet those people, I'm just kind of like, well, now your whole conception of what a marine biologist has been confronted. I hope you change your mind now. And so there's a lot of things that go on Twitter where people post pictures of themselves of like with the hashtag, this is what a scientist looks like. And so I really think that the biggest obstacle is just everyone understanding and being inclusive, that there are people from all over the world, different backgrounds, different genders, different sexualities, like we're all different. And our differences don't make us incapable of doing anything. Our differences make us strong. Our differences are really important and vital in science, in everything. If we were all the same, it would be really boring. So all scientists are not the same. We don't all look the same. We don't all dress the same. We don't all think the same. And that's why science has been so successful, because we have a lot of different viewpoints and ideas that we bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. All the work you're doing is really, really amazing, and for everybody to be able to watch.
Thank you.
So to everyone tuning in, you can follow Jasmine on and her work on social media. Jasmine was also nice enough to provide her email address for questions. And thank you so much for joining us today, Jasmine. It was great talking to you and hearing about your STEM journey.
Thanks.
And again, we want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. And stay tuned to earthecho.org to find out more information about all of our exciting new programs, including upcoming virtual events just like this one. And we are also so excited to announce a brand new STEM competition from EarthEcho International. And we have a video on that.
I'm Philippe Cousteau, and I am so excited to announce the latest program from EarthEcho International. It's called the Our Echo Challenge, and it's a new way for students to protect biodiversity and get the funding to do it. The Our Echo Challenge empowers teams of middle school students to explore their community, identify threats to local species, and then submit an idea for a project that will help to restore a healthy ecosystem. 10 finalist teams will join EarthEcho International in Washington, D.C. to present their ideas, and the top 3 teams will be awarded grants to turn their project into a reality. Go to ourechochallenge.org and join our STEM competition by submitting your plan to change the world.
Yeah, so you guys can visit our website to submit your plan to change the world. And the deadline for the Our Echo Challenge is April 21st, 2020. And be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho on our social media channels for a fun new activity series coming up. On behalf of EarthEcho International, please stay safe and healthy, And thank you for joining us and keep exploring.